Hello everyone, it's Karen. So today is Wednesday when I'm filming this, and Wednesday is the day that I tried my best to group together all my side jobs. So it is like a work day for me during the summer with editing, tutoring. What else did I do today? My naturalist job, my regular job, I did all the jobs. And so I only had time for a super shorty, and the book that I chose to read was the Care Manifesto. This book I adored. It's so good. So I basically destroyed a bookmark by marking this book up. So I'll just kind of go through my bookmarks and tell you a little bit about this book. So this book is basically about care and how we care for each other and how we care for each other in communities. So just to start by defining what care is, because that's important. Care is our individual and common ability to provide the political, social, material, and emotional conditions that allow the vast majority of people and living creatures on this planet to thrive, along with the planet itself. So this book is all about that and how we achieve that, and how basically we have a problem in our world today, which is mainly probably due to capitalism, where ideas of social welfare and community have been pushed aside for individualized notions of resilience, wellness, and self-improvement promoted through a ballooning self-care industry, which regulates care to something we are supposed to buy for ourselves on a personal basis. And I so agree that while self-care is something that is super important to me, it also has become almost like a trigger word for me, because I feel like a lot of workplaces will use conversations surrounding self-care not to change the work itself, but to put it back on you that oh, you should be able to handle this. Maybe you need more self-care, while keeping the expectations the same. So that is something I have to say about that. In order to have this environment of care, I have to find this bookmark. There are a few things you need. So you need mutual support. Everyone needs to work together and help everybody. In addition, there needs to be some structural support to provide consistency and just to allow this mutual aid to survive over time and not to just fall away when the community changes, grows, etc. Also, public space is super important, and that's something that is talked about later in this book about what public space is. So public space is basically anywhere that you can go for free and just enjoy nature or access resources like the library. And one of the things that I found really interesting, because this book is basically British with US mentioned a little bit, but I'm pretty sure whoever created this is probably British. They talked about public spaces being I think they said parks, libraries, and museums. But in the United States, museums are not really public spaces. There are a few museums here and there that are free, and there's also museums in Chicago where they have certain free days. But for the most part in the United States, you do have to pay for museums, and honestly, they're kind of expensive. So I just found that interesting how, while both countries seem to need to put a lot of effort into creating a culture of care, the US might have farther to go. But yeah, just how public spaces are just being decimated, and there's just more and more places where you have to pay to get in. Also need to share resources. So again, for me, this means I need to use the library more and stop buying books. And finally, they need to be democratic, which I think we need to work on as people in the United States. So speaking of that, one of the things I really liked about this book is it kind of dealt with stuff on a macro and a micro level. And the macro stuff to me didn't really mean very much. I just don't really understand, or I don't want to say I don't care, but it's just not my jam. I want to focus on what can I do to shape my community? What can I do to make things better around me? And maybe that's not the best approach, but that's kind of where my thinking goes. So some of the other things I marked in this book was basically how communities are focusing more on policing and surveillance rather than creating social provisions to promote human flourishing. One of the things I've seen a lot are like those Ring door cameras, or like the doorbell camera things. And like there's other brands too, but everyone has those. Well, yeah, it's like cool, right, to be able to see who's at your door, but that is a way of policing. And I just feel like maybe it's not the best idea. A lot of technology, I feel like, may not be the best idea, although it's marketed to us in a way that makes us think that it's going to help us in some way. There could be negative impacts of it as well. And the doorbell cameras, I can definitely see having a negative impact on certain populations of people. This was like a real mind switch for me. Basically, the conversations I often hear by wealthy people is about how they pulled themselves up by their bootstraps, or how they worked hard and they think other people need to work hard, and all this sort of conversation. And this book says one of the great ironies surrounding care is that it's actually the rich who are most dependent on those they pay to service them. Then I highlighted, or I like underlined on top of words, in innumerable personal ways. So basically, like, the rich think they're all self-sufficient and stuff, but they're actually paying money for a lot of the services that allow them to free up time in their personal life and spend more time at work, thus making more money. And in addition, I just feel like they are actually more dependent than a lot of lower income people that have skills, know how to do stuff, and have to do it themselves as well. And then finally, what does my last little bookmark say? Oh, the last little bookmark talks about more porous borders, and it's talking about how, as a country, we should let in migrants and people that need help. But I took this in a different way, and I think we need to be more porous in our mindset and our like mental borders, I guess, and our connections with people. So my favorite bit about BookTube is meeting people from other countries. And like, I read this book, okay, now I'm going to go and search up videos to see other people who have read it and see their thoughts on it. But in addition, whether it's this book or just a fiction book or just talking to people on VOXER about life, I have grown so much through connections with people from different countries, just because they might just have a slightly different mindset on something, or say something in a different way, or like view things in a different way than many Americans do. And I have been shaped so much by those outside of the American culture, which the American culture is actually a bunch of different cultures, as I'm sure any country is. But I think we need to be more porous about who we learn from and where we look to find experts on different topics. Like, I think we definitely need to have a more global mindset, both in our personal life with ideas that can help us as an individual, with what our communities look like, what do schools look like, what does medicine look like, what does a pandemic look like, how are different countries handling different things. Oh, we have shooters that are going to parades and killing people. Let's look at other countries that don't have problems like this. What can we learn from them? Which, side note, I don't know if it's been on like world news or not, but there was a recent shooting in a Chicago suburb, basically at a parade. People were at a 4th of July parade, and this gunman just went to town. That was actually the town that was my first teaching job. Like, I worked in that town. I know people in that town. And I think people have said this before. If it can happen there, it can happen anywhere. They've said that about all these different towns. This is an affluent, white, Jewish population of people. It's one of the most affluent zip codes in the whole state of Illinois. And yeah, I'm going off on a tangent, but I just think, okay, we have a little bit of a problem. Let's collaborate with others and see what we can do to solve it. Just saying. So, the final thing I'll say about this book is it kind of affirmed something I've thought for a while, which is that teachers tend to be lower paid. Teachers tend to be women, thus they're lower paid because they're women. And this talked about care workers in all the different ways that could look, hospitals, social work, teachers, all that sort of stuff. They tend to be women. Like, I think 2/3 of care jobs are done by women, and thus they're lower paid. And like, the people that do this sort of care work, they are so valuable to our society, to our communities, to lifting people up. Yeah, I just really, really liked this book. The one other thing I'll say, I know I said my last thing was my one other thing, but it made me think about how people work together in communities. And one of the things I've noticed in my living lots of places is it seems like when I go to big cities like Chicago or whatever, that they actually have a greater sense of community within neighbors in the city. And I'm not sure if that's because everyone is so close physically to their neighbors or what, but it just seems like they're doing this care work in a much better way than people that live in the country and tend to be more self-sufficient. That is probably a complete like globalization and not accurate, but that's just been my experience. I'm curious what you guys think, because I know that a lot of the booktubers actually do live in smaller communities, so maybe they have a completely different experience than mine living in those two different places. But yeah, I'm curious if anyone else has read this and what their thoughts are. I loved it, and I definitely think that this book is not just an end, but needs to be a conversation that continues. So I'm going to search out other people and see what they had to say about it and try and get involved in a dialogue with people from different places who have different experiences and just see what their reactions to this book are. Thank you guys, and let me know if you've read this.